So, Catherine, what made you decide to write a book for single parents?
Well, honestly, I was going through a season with my, at the time, 16-year-old, where she completely lost her mind. And she had turned into someone that I did not recognize. And as a parent, I realized that although I have a great circle, I didn't necessarily have people around me that I was comfortable talking to about what was going on. I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want a bunch of advice I wasn't going to use. So it was therapeutic for me. And I just kind of sat down and wrote out what I was feeling and what I had been feeling over the last 16 years.
As a single parent, we are expected to be two parents to a child. And we both know that that doesn't work out too well. So when you wrote your affirmations for a month, how did you place it so that a mother or a father as a single parent can do what they need to do for their child or children?
So the funny thing is it wasn't intentionally meant to be a book for fathers too. But because of the place that I'm in life, I'm not an other parent basher per se. So it just kind of worked out as where anything that a single mom goes through, if a single father is the custodial parent, he goes through the exact same thing. So it wasn't my end game. It just worked out that way. And it worked out that way because I was transparent.
And I think, too, is that fathers, even today, are at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
I find that mothers who bring out boys seem to be a little bit off better than when they try to bring up their daughters. And I'm not quite sure what the problem is or why that's so. I raised a child by myself, and it was a boy. And although we hit a lot of rocky patches, when I spoke to other parents about single parents, about their working with their daughters, it seemed like it was more magnified and more, I guess, manic than it is for guys.
Well, that might partially be because of the fact of our children, right? Female or male are like little representations of ourselves, right? So they embody the best and the worst of us. And I think for moms with daughters, because I do have two daughters and I have a son, what I see with the bumping of the heads with my daughters is me having been a female, having been a young girl at one point in time, I feel like I know, right? Like
right.
I completely know everything that they're thinking, everything that they're going through, right? Taking for granted that they're completely separate little human beings. I think you naturally as a parent, because you want the best for them and you want to save them from the things that you went through, you naturally interject yourself. And that's harder when you're parenting a child of the opposite sex because you have no idea what that feels like. So you're naturally more understanding.
I think so. Although I do remember telling my son that even though I was a mom, I remember going through incidents similar to what he was encountering. And these are the options I had available to me at the time. And I said, of course, it's 30 years later here, so that the options or the choices that you have are a little more extensive. And society has a way of looking the other way when it comes with a guy. Unfortunately for you, I'm not going to look the other way.
Right.
And I found that raising a child is very solitary when you're doing it by yourself because other parents may not be doing the same thing in terms of raising their child as to what you're doing. So what are some of the affirmations that you suggest for single moms?
Well, one trend throughout the 31 days is to take care of yourself, and to put yourself first. And I know that sounds selfish. I don't mean that from a monetary place and or a materialistic place. I mean it from a place of, if you're no good, you cannot take care of anyone else. So you have to, take those 5 minutes to pull yourself together when something's happening. You have to, go to the nail salon if that's your thing. Have that glass of wine if that's your thing. Whatever you need to do to keep first things first, and be able to place yourself in a healthy place, then you need to do that. And that is a trend throughout the book, as well as it's okay to fail, right? You're doing the best that you can.
Yes. A lot of
Yeah.
parents want to bring up perfect kids, but it doesn't work that way.
It's not realistic.
And because you yourself is not perfect. I think one of the best things I did for my kid was I taught him the difference between lying and telling the truth, and taught him that telling the truth was the best thing that he could ever do, because that way he won't have to worry about forgetting what he said originally.
Right, right. And I too have a very transparent household. Of course, you naturally deal with the lies versus the truth, because kids go through that stage when they're smaller, where they just naturally start telling lies for some reason, and you have to kind of bring them back. But I teach transparency in my house, and the best way that I teach that is by living it, right? I don't teach secrets from my kids. Now, I don't put kids in grown folks' business per se, but, mommy did this when she was younger. Mommy had that experience. It worked out like this. As an adult, relationships work. They don't work. Or, just real life examples are shared with them, so they understand that, this person that they look at as Superwoman is actually a fallible human being, and I make mistakes too.
And you're a role model. I told my kid that there are certain things I can do, and there's certain things that I can't do. And that's because you should have certain values that you need to honor. So I never slept around, and I had a lot of friends who were single parents who went out and slept around, man or woman, and then they would tell their teen kids, well, I can do that, I'm an adult. No, you can't. You shouldn't, because you're setting a double standard.
Right.
And it's not fair. I remember my son hearing me lie one time, and he says, why did you tell a lie? And I said, because I'm getting paid for it. And he says, do you mean at work you lie all the time? I said, when my boss asks me to cover him, it's a form of lying. And he expects me as his secretary to tell people not the complete truth. So, Mom, is that a white lie or a black lie? And this is a very important lesson to get across to your child. It's very difficult for when they see you do work and they see how you behave in work, and then when you come home you behave differently.
Right.
And
more often, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you go right ahead.
I was just going to say, and it says it in the book too, they hear what we do far more than they ever hear what we say.
Oh, yeah, their antennas are up 24/7. They can leap couches in a single bound. They can hear through doors without a stethoscope. And they know when food comes out of the refrigerator or the oven.
Oh, yeah.
When it's time for bath, they don't hear you. When it's time to go to bed, they go underground with a flashlight. Come on.
Right.
We all know this.
Open up a bag of chips.
Open up a bag of chips. I think it's a universal thing, but I know it's not a universal thing when you're a single mom trying to raise a child or children, because you live in a vacuum, almost.
Right.
So a book like yours would be very good because it would help a mother, because most of the time it is a mom who is raising the child or kids, to have a kind of Dr. Seuss book for them
Right.
to go into and learn from your wisdom.
And that was the purpose, right? I wrote it from a selfish place to help me work through what I was going through, but I ended up publishing it because I realized, as I said at the top of the interview, I felt like I was alone. Like, these are not conversations that we have. People live to paint the picture that their child is perfect and there are no problems, and whatever this end result is that you see, like, we got there by osmosis, and that is the farthest from the truth. And it fails young parents coming up because then they're trying to live up to this standard that doesn't even exist. You're gonna fail. Like, you're gonna drop the ball so many times. You're gonna live in insufficiency. You're gonna have to figure out how to stretch. Like, it's just a lot that we don't discuss with the younger generations as they're coming up that would help them be better parents, as opposed to having to fumble through these things like, I have, or my friends have. Or even like my mom had, because of course my mom is a baby boomer, so she came up in the generation of what happens in this house stays in this house.
Yes.
And that's just the end of the conversation there.
And not only that, she was also brought up with tradition. Yep. And the rigid structure of our culture and our society.
Yes.
So she already had 2 strikes against her, plus she was an African American, which was thrown in for good measure. So that the type of world in which she grew up in which she had to fight was a little bit different from the type of world in which you grew up in that you had to fight, is different from the type of world that your children are growing up, and they have to fight. Every kid, before they become adult, has a battle, has a fight, that they have to prove that they're capable of assuming that mantle of responsibility before they become an adult.
Agreed.
And they get that from their parents. It would seem to me, though, that you would want to, there are no classes out there to train single parents to be good parents. I think that's something you ought to look into with your background.
Actually, I am doing something similar. Not quite there yet, and I am going to put a pin in that because that is something that I would be interested in doing. But through my L3C, CHBM Services Development Programming, I am hosting career development workshops for single moms, ages 18 through 40. As a single mother, coming up, having to make ends meet with 2 young girls, I've made $6 an hour, I've made $9 an hour, I've made $15 an hour, and then I make really good money now. But I had most of my children's life, I was somewhere in the $15 an hour range, attempting to take care of 3 people, right?
Yes, which is very difficult. I was raised to be barefoot and pregnant during the 50s.
Oh.
Okay? I was raised to marry some corporate guy, raise his children, and make sure he became, president of the company or something. And when that did not work out, I was there with a 1-year-old child who turned out to be gifted and talented. Of course, he was doing things that Leonardo da Vinci was doing when he was 2 years old, okay?
Right.
And all my father had to say was, you got a tiger by the tail. And that was it. And my mother said, you made your bed, you lie in it.
Right.
And so I'm glad to find somebody who made $1 more than I did when I first started. I started at $5 an hour. And I found that becoming a professional temporary would be the best way for me to get him from point A to point B, which is exactly what I did. So I started out, again, at $5 an hour. And by the time I finally finished being a professional temporary, 10 years later, I was making $25. I was worth it. But he was brought up during the lean period, if you want to put it that way. And he has a very healthy respect for what it means to go out and earn your keep.
Right.
And I think those kind of lessons are really important for kids to learn so that they have a better understanding of how hard their mother or father is working to earn that money to put food on the table, pay the gas and the insurance on the car, and make sure they have clothing.
Right.
Because those are lessons they got to learn.
Absolutely.
So through your workshops, what's your curriculum look like?
So my curriculum deals with getting you in the door and helping you to stay there. So we go through the application process, we go through resume writing and creation, we go through interviewing skills, and we go through the thank you letter. And, sprinkled in there just for kicks and giggles, everyone in the course, because of course it's a single mom, they get a copy of my book. So that's the encouragement on the back end. I have apparel as well that's available. So they'll get one of my shirts or my sweatshirts. And then there's a journal that's attached to the book, because that's another thing, right? Living by example, my ability to write the book was from me journaling. Writing it out is therapeutic. You're not always going to have somebody to talk to. The best thing for you to do is to get it out when it's fresh, and you can write through it. So that was the thought behind putting that package together for them. And then it's a 4-hour workshop, and it's just a good time to be had by all, because I have real conversations with the moms that are in the group, and there's almost no situation that I have not been through or someone in my life has not been through. So there's almost nothing that I can't relate to. So we can have a conversation about it all.
Do you have any kind of ideas for a book for grandparents who are suddenly becoming parents again because their own grown-up children no longer want the responsibility of bringing up the kids they have, so they sort of give them to their parents and then walk out?
I don't, but the reality of that too is I don't really think that journey is too different, outside of the fact that you have to reacclimate yourself to raising a child, right? Because you were in essence free. But it's kind of like riding a bike again. You might have been off of it for a couple of years, but like once you hop back on, it kind of comes back to you. And I think parenting is the same way. The only, I guess, caveat that I would add is you dealing with the emotions associated with it, and not growing in a resentment or harboring any type of resentment towards your child.
Yes. And I think communication plays a very important role between the parent and the child, or the parent and the children. I mean, my son used to come home and brood. I said, look, listen up. I said, my crystal ball's in the shop because I haven't been able to find a part yet for it. So unless you tell me what's going on in your head, I have no idea, and I will not be able to help you. And they look at you like you're stark raving mad. But the reality of the situation is that you got to get them to talk to you, and you know that for a 3 or 4 year period, they just don't.
Right. Now, that's something that I can say, well, outside of that, we'll say it was about a 12-month period, because the first couple of months that my daughter was going through her transition, I knew, but I didn't know. Right? Like I was noticing the changes, and I was picking up on things, so I was trying to have conversations, and I was trying to ask questions, but she was doing her thing. And she didn't want to talk to mommy, which was odd, because I am very close to my girls. They're only 2.5 years apart, and I've been close to them their whole life. We talk about everything. We used to do everything together. Now they're 18 and almost 16, so they don't like me anymore because they're too cool for mommy. But that's a part of the process.
They'll come around. Trust me. When they graduate from college, that they'll come around.
I keep hearing that.
Because the big wide world is a lot more frightening than it was when we went. And the big problem is that you have to land on your feet.
Right.
The bridge between the world in which they're sheltered and the real world, there's a bridge there. And a lot of them don't make it across that bridge.
Right.
So when they hit that age, all of a sudden the parent is their safety net again, just in case they stumble and fall. Some don't. I mean, my son at his school, Parsons, they offered a semester course on getting the kids, showing the kids how to bridge the world of college into the world of whatever career they were training for.
That's good.
Yes. So when the time came, he had no problem. Right. Now, he couldn't decide whether he wanted to remain an independent contractor or be employed by somebody. So he went back and forth on that for several years, and he finally settled down in being an independent contractor. But at the same time, parents, he worked during those transition periods.
Right.
Because their training comes back to them. I was told there was an old saying in our family, give us a kid when he's very young, and by the time he's 6 years old, he's ours for life. And those are the Jesuits who are telling you that if you gave them a young child, they could train them in such a manner that by the time they reach a certain age, they may stray, but they'll come back to the original discipline and training that you put into them in the first place.
Yeah, I believe that.
So that your kids will come back. They may not stick around for long, but they will. I mean, I think my son's 44, and at 42, he finally thanked me for the good job I did in bringing him up.
Right.
It took a while, but he finally did it, and I really didn't care. The fact that he actually said, for a single mom, you did a pretty good job. And for somebody who wasn't trained, you really showed me what I needed to do. And you kind of live to hear those kind of things. A lot of parents never hear those words at all. So I was just grateful. So have you as the equal to your Mother's Love book?
I am. Actually, I am thinking about doing a book for dads. And this is where I'm coming from with that. And I also already started some of the research on it. Single fathers in the African American community have such a bad rap. And it's so funny to me because I was a tomboy growing up. So as an adult, the bulk of my circle is males. Yeah. They are phenomenal fathers. And I mean like phenomenal, most of which are married too. So it really tickles me. I'm like, really? Like single fathers, there's a whole phenom behind this when most of the men in my life are actually married or been like they married their high school sweetheart or they've been with the same woman like forever. So it really tickles me. And fathers need encouragement too, right? It's not about, not having the other parent, because that's not the reality behind being a single mom or a single dad. It just simply means that you're unmarried.
Yes.
It's just unfortunate that an additive of that is that in some cases the other parent may very well be absent. But parents doing it alone, parents doing it together, parents need encouragement too. So I was looking at my next book being dedicated to the dads.
I think that's a great idea. And I think, too, when you go in to write your third book, you should do it for parents who are transgender and are homosexual and gays as well.
Oh,
because
wow.
I think that these people are raising kids with two mothers or two fathers, but they're considered a single unit. And
Hmm.
the reaction that they get from other, what most of society would consider normal, single parents is a lot different. And I think these kids have a handicap against them even before people give these parents a chance to show that they're giving their kids the same values. Our culture and our society is very traditional and very hidebound to what has gone on before. And I'm sure you noticed that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
the different perceptions of what is accepted and what it is not acceptable, and you know this about black fathers because it has been prevailing for a long time now,
Mhm.
that is unfair. And I think
Mhm.
that the time has come for people to realize that it doesn't matter who or what is raising the child, as long as they're given certain ethics and
Mhm.
values and discipline, they'll be just fine.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what people are missing when they take a look at these kids coming out of same sex families. And
Well,
as a
that kind of.
result, the adults are ostracized unless they stay within their own community. So it's kind of like all single parents are in a ghetto all by themselves because the
Right.
married couples don't want anything to do with them. They're dangerous. And I just think the perception needs to be shattered.
That's interesting for two reasons. One, I have a childhood friend um, whose parents were very good friends of my mom. Um, both of their parents were gay. Of course, their parents were together at one point in time, but then their dad ended up coming out as homosexual, and their mom came out as lesbian. So my whole life, I only knew them to be with their same sex partners. I didn't even put one and one together to make two that they were ever together at any point in time. And then, of course, in my generation, it as we got older, it became a little more acceptable. So I have high school friends who are now openly gay and they have children in same-sex marriages. And then my kids' generation, and my kids' generation is so accepting and
Yes.
understanding of absolutely everything. It is crazy. The conversations that I have with my girls, and that I have been having over maybe like the last 4 or 5 years, just about sexuality and what happens, and these young kids being suicidal and in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, and they're struggling with identity, and like they're closeted, but their friends are completely accepting of it. It's their parents, right? Because their parents are my age.
Yeah, well, it took
Um,
67 years to get there. I was born in the 50s. I don't have to tell you, and it sounds like you were born in the 80s,
yeah.
70s, 80s. And it's such a big jump. My son was born in the 70s, and things were just loosening up just a little bit in the 70s. But by the time the 90s came around, the acceptance of what you were was really being allowed.
Mhm.
And that's made a big difference within our society and culture. But the values that are perceived are still rather shaky because
Yeah.
it's not values that are shared equally across the board.
Right. Right. It's more so rooted in the biblical right
Yes.
versus wrong.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with the love or the ability to be able to take care of. It's strictly rooted in homosexuality is a sin, so this is not what you should be doing. So we don't care about anything else, and we're not open to the conversation about anything else because at the end of the day, you're going to hell.
Exactly. And I think these perceptions need to be changed. And I think that, at least with some of your books following this first one, mention should be made of that, because it used to be when you brought up your child, you had to have a religion to give them. And
Mm.
I told my parents, I said, that's ludicrous. I'm going to expose my child to all the different faiths that are out there. And when he becomes an adult, he can choose what best suits him. I do not have the right to make him believe in God if he decides he doesn't believe in him. It's like saying there's a Santa Claus or an Easter Bunny. I said, you're talking about an individual's faith. And that only comes for a person to explore what is out there. But I knew when I was growing up, I had friends who came from Irish Catholic families. And their future was already ordained by their father because of his Catholic faith. So she had to fight to go to college. Her father wanted her to drop out at 14 and get married at 15 because that's the way they did it in the old country. And if she was a good Catholic girl, she should obey her father. I mean, this is prevalent within our culture still.
Wow. That's interesting too, because so I am a Christian by every stretch of the imagination for the most part. And my girls grew up in church, and they are at that point where they have their questions and they're looking for those answers, and I encourage that completely. They are not beat over the head to be anything, because to your point, your relationship with God or your relationship with whatever higher power that you believe in is your relationship.
It's a personal one, yes.
So my only demand is you have to have some type of relationship, right? Because spirituality is a big deal. You need something to tap into to keep you grounded. So that's my cutoff. Now, what you know, if it's Hare Krishna, if it's Buddha, like whatever you decide, if you can deal with whatever comes with that, then go forth, and that's what you do. Like I'm fine with it, because I went through my journey. I grew up Christian Reformed, and of course, because I was forced to go to church and you were forced to look a certain type of way, I completely rebelled. Like as soon as I had the opportunity, and I looked into Islam, I looked into the 5%ers. I read about some of everything and entertained some things until I, finally figured it out. I didn't come back to church for real until I was in my 20s, and that's when I brought my girls there. But it was my choice, and it was on my terms, and I had found a church home that embodied everything that made sense to me about having a relationship with Christ. And that worked. So I expect my girls to go through their same journey. And like I said, my only demand per se that's non-negotiable is that you got to find something, and you have to find something, because you will go crazy in this world if you don't have something to tie yourself to. There
anchor.
has to be some type of moral. Yeah, there has to be some type of moral anchor in your life.
Yes,
that's important.
Absolutely. So, Cattherine, please tell everybody where they can find you, where you can find your books, your workshops, and a little bit of wisdom.
Okay. Well, so my books, my sweatshirts, and my sweaters or my hoodies are available on Amazon. The books are available in Kindle. They're available in audiobook, and they are available in paperback. And they're also available anywhere that books can be ordered. So you can Google it, and it will come up. Amazon is just the main source. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Instagram at CHBM Services. You can find my social media pages for the book on Instagram and on Facebook at A Mother's Love 31 Days. I have my own website, www.chbmservices.com, and you can contact CHBM Services Development Programming through the web page too. I've been a little bit of everywhere lately, but most importantly, coming up in October will be the launch party for CHBM Services Development Programming. It's called Mother's Day Isn't Just in May. Imagine that. And it is a ticketed event. It's $25. It's at Jacob's Well in Evergreen Park in Illinois. And that it promises to be 4 hours dedicated to moms. There's going to be a fashion show. There'll be vendors selling jewelry, selling wigs, selling body products, selling toys, like all of the things that women love. There will be wine. There will be a comedian host. There will be a DJ, and there will be nothing but women. It is an all-female event. Every entrepreneur participating, hosting, behind the scenes, it's an all-female event, and I cannot wait.
That sounds awesome. So do you have any bit of wisdom for single moms in today's chaotic world?
Absolutely. Take the pressure off yourself. There is no such thing as perfect, and as long as you are sincerely doing the best that you can, your kids know that, and they're going to love you for it.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for listening to Cool Your Heels with Lillian Caldwell and her special guest, Cattherine McNeil, who wrote the book, A Mother's Love, 31 Days of Aspirations for the Single Mom. You can hear and listen to this interview all over again at facebook.com/PWR Network LLC, twitter.com twitter.com at Caldwell, CAULDWELL, _S, also on iTunes, and you're also on the website, https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. And before you go away and stray, Emerson had this to say: in Society and Solitude in 1870, much will have more. Thank you all very much for listening. And remember, you can listen to this all over again, also on AMFM247.com. And if you have Alexa, you can say, Alexa, play me AMFM247, and this program will show up. And the reason why I'm talking low is so I don't wake up my Alexa. So thank you all very much for listening. And remember, please keep listening. Thank you. Okay, you're still there? Cattherine?